I'm Mike Gibbs, a health, disability and community advocate and a political scientist. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of this new bill before Parliament called the Universal Housing Bill in Aotearoa. I have been an advocate for beneficiaries and low-income families for many years now, and I have a big interest in housing. I support this new bill coming into law. My written submission outlined 5 reasons why I am supporting this bill, and these are: 1. Universal housing is the future of housing in Aotearoa. Everyone who wishes to own a home has a pathway to do so. Bringing house prices down, number 3. Number 4, limit the barriers to housing and do away with more reforms in the housing area. And number 5, it is a fair and equitable bill. I will use my time left to go into these in a little more detail. Housing is a basic human need. It is widely acknowledged that the state is legitimately the authority responsible to ensure that citizens have adequate access to decent housing. Since Michael Joseph Savage's vision of a home for all New Zealanders back in the 1930s, New Zealand has struggled to have a universal way in which New Zealanders can live and then, if they wish, own their own homes. This legislation will allow the government to build or buy enough homes for those on the housing register, effectively doing away with the register. Then each year continue to buy up 25,000 homes over the next 10 years at a cost of about 15 billion, and build 1,000 homes each year, increasing the social housing stock owned by the government by 3,500 a year, which will mean over the first 10 years the housing total will be at approximately 125,000, or 16% of the total housing stock in New Zealand, and this will rise each year to the ultimate goal of owning 80% of Aotearoa's housing stock in approximately 25 years. Give everyone affordable living options. Everyone who is on the register or qualifies for the register a home for life. Everyone who rents a social house will still be subject to the rent of no more than 25% of their income. This is a drop from the 30% brought in April 2027. Everyone who wishes will have their own pathway to ownership. There will be bipartisan support. No new government will change this policy ever. I do support these points. In this bill, everyone who wishes to own a home has a pathway to do so. These are already set out in the current legislation, the Aotearoa Homes and Communities Act 2019. The pathways that exist are first home loans, first home partnership loans, tenant home ownership. All these will exist still, but with an increased cap of from 20,000 to 50,000. In the short term, overall house prices may increase. However, I have not seen any evidence to say that this will happen. Transitioning Aotearoa New Zealand to a universal housing model where the government guarantees affordable, high-quality public housing for all would cause private house prices and rents to drop significantly. By removing housing as a speculative investment and continually expanding supply, this will deflate the private market. Vanessa Cole, an academic who wrote the book The Case for Universal State Housing in Aotearoa New Zealand, suggests that house prices have been so high because it is based solely on the supply issues and many politicians' belief that housing is a speculative commodity in the first place. The price between the private market and average household income would decrease, which would mean that property investors would take their money out of the housing system, making much easier for the average person to be able to afford a home. As more state tenants buy their homes, the government continues to build more, and as this happens, housing stock in Aotearoa, New Zealand increases. Yet the percentage of state-owned and privately owned stock would stay at a 80-20 split. We would also see a reduction in the cost of living, with rents and mortgages no longer consuming the majority of incomes. Disposable incomes would increase, boosting other sectors of the economy. Interest rates on mortgages would drop. Governments would not have to funnel any extra money into accommodation supplements or temporary additional support payments that could be transferred to infrastructure, construction and maintenance costs for their houses. Other barriers to go would be the construction and financing costs, including materials, infrastructure and zoning regulations. All of these would change in favour of creating cheaper homes. The rental barrier, no more a critical shortage of rental homes, would mean a higher proportion of lower income household budgets will go back into spending on necessaries and volunteer spending for the family. The home ownership barrier, where fewer and fewer home buyers are locked out of the market as the gap between household incomes and real estate prices moves further away from each other. Under this policy legislation, everyone, as I said earlier, will have a pathway to ownership, meaning that there will be more housing stock overall. Since the reforms in the late 1940s, housing policies in New Zealand have been unfair on or targeted towards our section of people within society. In 2023, the census data showed family and household statistics for Maori. This provided meaningful insight into the housing requirements for iwi to use to benefit their people. For an example, 1 in 5 Maori live in overcrowded homes, where 1 or 2 more bedrooms were needed. Kangaora has not taken this into consideration when starting the multi-dwelling program. For an example, more than 1 dwelling on 1 property. And they have not built many of these new houses with 4 bedrooms or more. The hard reality is that most seniors, the disabled and Maori live in homes that do not adequately support their needs. The ability to remain in one's home safely, independently and comfortably rather than being relocated becomes even more dependent on the quality of life that one's home can support. Most housing units today are not equipped with the necessary age-friendly features. From a design point of view, new houses will be built and be able to be modified for the needs of the tenant. 3 countries where universal housing has been successful and models a fair and equitable solution are Singapore, the Netherlands and the city of Vienna. Singapore currently houses approximately 80% of the resident population. It is the most prominent real-world example of universal public housing built from a universal design. The Netherlands, Europe's highest proportion of social and public rental housing, with housing association managing about 30% of the nation's total housing stock. And in Austria, Vienna, the city of Vienna, about 60% of Vienna's population lives in municipally owned and heavily subsidised cooperative housing, continually builds and subsidises units to keep the rental market permanently accessible to middle and working class families. This legislation acknowledges that we need to start small like the Netherlands and over time move up to the example of Vienna with the ultimate goal of being a universal housing system such as Singapore. Adopting a whole-of-society approach to social housing shows that Aotearoa is committed to reducing the level for the cost of living while also growing the economy at the same time. I am pleased to see that this legislation has taken some of these points, expanded them for Aotearoa's current situation. Some of the positives to our economy would be productivity would increase, political and social stability, and we create more opportunities for international capital and investment in infrastructure and industry. Campbell Roberts, a retired Salvation Army officer and the founder of the Salvation Army Parliamentary Unit here in New Zealand, in a social media post said, "Social housing is not where people choose to live, it is where they end up when every other door has closed." And good housing policy creates stability. Stability creates everything else: health, education, employment, family well-being, etc. This legislation will make social housing a good housing policy where people will choose to be. Did you know at least 2 of our former national MPs grew up in state houses? One of them, Sir Robert Muldoon, he still lived in a state house while in office as Prime Minister. This new legislation addresses many issues, creates a pathway to independence for those who never had it. In the long term, creates a society where everyone benefits, and where a home just isn't a basic need, it is an expectation by all. I conclude again by stating that I am in support of this legislation. I'm hopeful that there will be bipartisan and cross-partisan support, which would see this legislation thrive and grow and build on that has come before for a prosperous future for Aotearoa, New Zealand. Thank you for your time and your attention to this matter.